guys. For those who don't know me, I'm Cameron Wilby. I'm the instructor at Origin Code Academy. Tonight, I'm going to teach you the basics of CSS and show you how developers and designers get their websites to look so bloody good. First of all, a couple of announcements. We will be recording this session and putting it on YouTube. So for those of you that don't see that or want to catch up on what I talked about tonight, it'll be on YouTube. I'll also try and be better about posting the slides onto meetup.com afterwards. But tonight we're going to talk about CSS, and here's what we're going to cover. So, this is level 2. As Jeff mentioned, this is pretty much what I would like to teach tonight, but if you guys have anything specific you'd like to learn, feel free to raise your hand at any time, because the idea is to get you guys, learning how to code. I'm going to cover 4 things. First, I'll talk about what CSS is. Then we'll see some CSS in action. Then after that, I'm going to talk to you about a practice called rapid development, which is where instead of building things from scratch, you tend to take more of an approach of building on someone else's work, either by paying for it or downloading a theme, which just gets you from A to B a lot faster. And then I have this section called Build a Website. If you guys already have a project in mind, obviously I'll be glad to come around and help you build that. Other than that, maybe as a group we can figure out some kind of project to build, because otherwise I'm just going to say build a website about yourself. It's a great starting point. It's where everyone starts. Okay, does anyone have any questions about level 2 or any expectations they'd like me to know about? And just sure. Okay. So, we talked about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript last week, and we talked about how HTML is like building blocks of the house, CSS is like the interior styling, and JavaScript is like the interactivity of the house, the electricity, the plumbing. It's my favorite metaphor in the world. Tonight we're going to go a little bit more into the details on CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and read off the slide because that's how great a presenter I am. It's the interior designer for your home. You tell CSS how you want your house to look, and it will get it done. So specifically, you write CSS style sheets. These come in the forms of CSS files in your web project. And a CSS style sheet basically contains rules. A rule contains a selector and a set of declarations. So we can see here on the left, I used to have this fancy laser pointer on here, but I don't think I do anymore, so I'll just talk about it. On the left there we have the selector, and then we have the multiple declarations. And we have 2 declarations. What we're saying is, for every H1 element that appears on the page, the first declaration says that the color should be blue. And then the second declaration says that the font size should be 12 pixels. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Something you may have seen before? Pretty good. So, for all those declarations, there are tons of properties that you can use. There are properties to set the font weight of some text, the size of some element, even to animate things on the page and make them zip around and look all fancy and cool. And then the values are just how you configure those properties. So here's a pretty basic example. This is actual CSS. So we have H1 there. We open up our rule by using the curly braces. And then we have 3 declarations. We have the color, which is the property name of one declaration, and then red, which is the value. Font size is another property name. 22 pixels would be the value. Font weight is the third property. Bold, we're saying it's going to be bold. So it'll be red, big, bold text. And that's how all our H1 elements are going to look. So, does anyone have any questions about the basic syntax of CSS?
Font size always expressed in pixels?
Font size can be expressed in pixels, EM, I believe also actual measurements like inches and things of that nature. So that's a good question. I'd go check out W3 Schools and see the full list of all those different details. So, anybody else have any questions?
Is W3 Schools the domain name?
W3schools.org. So now that we know kind of how CSS looks, I want to talk to you about how it's used with HTML. There's 3 ways that you can use CSS with HTML. There's inline styling. You can use an external style sheet or an internal style sheet. First of all, does anybody know in the room the differences between the three? No? Good. Alright. So, that makes this next slide a little easier. The first one is inline styling. First of all, don't do this ever. Inline styling is located in an attribute of the element being styled. So if we had a H1 element and I just had my name in there, I would literally style only that element using a style attribute. So I'm going to actually quiz you a little bit and make sure that you've all got past level 1. Does anybody know, can anybody tell me what an attribute is in HTML? An attribute is, say we had an A tag or an ing tag in HTML, and we need to give some additional information about that element. Say we have an image tag, and we need to say, well, where's the image? We use the src attribute. And likewise, if we had an A tag or an anchor tag, we need to tell it, well, that's basically a link. So where is this link going? The href section is an attribute. So we have a style attribute for all of our elements. And like I said, it's not reusable. It basically don't ever do this. Don't do this either. Internal style sheets. These are located inside only one HTML file. They're located in the head section. So we have a style section. This is what I'm talking about right here. I'm going to stand in front of the projector. So this style section right here, don't ever do that. It's not reusable and basically is legacy, but it's just good to know about. And then the final one, which you should do, is to use external style sheets. Excuse me. So this is where you create an actual separate CSS file. So for example there, you can see it's in the CSS folder and it's called site.css. What this allows you to do is make your CSS reusable across multiple HTML files. So let's say, for example, I don't know, I have my own personal website. I have my index.html file, and then I might have an about me page, a contact page, things like that, services. The CSS, if I have one CSS file, I can include those across multiple HTML files and keep a consistent styling among all those pages. Does that make sense to everybody?
Kind of like global variable.
Kind of like a global variable, yeah. So it's like global styling for the whole site. And the best part is, I only have to write it once, and it's every extra page I make, I don't have to go do the styling every single time, like with inline styling. I can just use the same CSS file. And even better than that, if I want to change the styling of the entire website, I only have to change it in one file. I don't have to go change like 5 different CSS files or 5 different HTML files, and all those rules. It's just, messy. Okay. So, if you have any questions about internal style sheets, go ahead.
So can you walk through the link href line and tell us what each of those things are doing?
Definitely.
So like, is the CSS, like the first CSS we see on the line, is that required no matter what style sheet you're using, or is that pointing to the specific file? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the question was basically, what is that section right there? Link href CSS site CSS. So if we want to include a CSS file into a HTML file, we add a link element to our head section. With me so far? And then the 2 attributes I need to set is, first of all, which CSS file am I including? So that would be css-site.css. And then the second one is the relationship, because the link could be used for anything, but if we're using it for CSS, I need to tell it this is a style sheet, CSS. So if you ever try and include some CSS and it doesn't work, one thing to check is that you have the relationship set up. You know that it's a style sheet. Okay. Just so you know, if you ever need to learn more about CSS, if you go on Code Academy, for example, they'll typically tell you to make sure you have the rel in there too.
So is that line of code for the style sheet, or for the CSS page, or is that to link to the CSS page?
This is inside the HTML page,
Right.
linking to the external CSS file.
And the external CSS file is named site.css.
The external CSS file is named site.
In a folder called CSS.
In a folder called CSS. So I'm actually going to do a demo where I'll show all this code as well, so you'll see like exactly how it looks. Yeah, spot on. Okay. So quick recap, inline styling, don't do it. External style sheets do that. It's the internal style sheets don't do those. I wish I put those in the right order. It's my bad. Okay. So when we talk about, the next thing I want to talk about is selector types. So if we quickly go over here. So the selector is the thing in red. So when we say H2, that's the selector portion, and then we have the rule with a list of declarations. So element selectors style a specific element type. So if we want all our H2s to look a certain way, or all our headers, or all our paragraphs, or even all our images, if say for example, anytime I add an image to a HTML page, I want it to be rounded, like circular. That's something you can do in CSS. It's basically a great way for deciding how elements should be styled universally for a custom design website. So let's say, if I don't have any CSS, you've all seen it, the basic HTML template. The H1 just looks like Times New Roman, 90s website, old, right? What I can do is I can specify CSS rules for all the different types of elements I might use on the page and make them uniformly look better, I guess. Make them a uniform design language. So that's an element selector where I actually style a specific type of element. Next one is an ID selector. So this is an inline style, or an inline style sheet, excuse me, where I have my style, and then CSS rule, and then some HTML. So ID selectors style elements with a specific ID. An ID must be specific to only one element. It's great for styling logos, or things that appear only once on a page. So the ID, we can see there's on that last line, H2 ID equals my name, and then the content of that H2 element. The ID right there, my name, I can only have one of those on the page. So I might have an image with an ID of logo, for example, which is the logo for the page. And I might choose to style that in a certain way, but that's very specific to that one element on the page. And it's really, that's where I can put my most customized CSS. Would be so far? Okay. So in this case, I have H2, it's called my name. And if I want to style that in CSS, I prefix the name of the ID with I'm going to call it a hashtag, because that's what everyone knows it as these days, or a pound symbol. And then I say that it's going to be red. Pretty simple stuff. The next one, which is a little more complicated, is the class selector. So a class can be used on any element, so it's reusable, and multiple elements can use the same class. So this is great for styling things like blog posts, or typically anything that might appear once on a page. Can anybody think of something that appears more than once on a website? So we have like blog posts, news sites have articles.
Forum posts.
Menu.
Huh? Yeah, like a menu. So we have like the nav bar at the top. We might show that nav bar more than once, right? So it's a great way for styling things that appear more than once on a page. So in my example here, I have a class called text red. This is a very, very trivial example. If I ever want to color some text red on any element, it's very easy for me to do now because I define a style called text red. It's prefixed with a period. And then my rule is that anything with this class should be colored red, because I'm using the color property and the red value. And then it's kind of cut off at the bottom, but you can see my H2 element has the text red class, and my paragraph underneath there also has the text red class.
And why don't the ones at the bottom have periods in front of them?
Why do the what, sorry?
Why don't they have periods in front of them?
Because in HTML, the class is just plain. You don't include a period in HTML. It's just kind of the way it is, trademark
I see what
symbol.
you're doing, okay.
So in CSS, we needed a way to, because you can see in the HTML, if I say class equals text red, you know I'm talking about a class. Whereas in CSS, I need different ways to differentiate between ID selectors and class selectors and element selectors, right? So ID would be a hashtag, and class selector would be the period. That help? And the last one I want to talk about is a pseudo selector. These are special selectors. They allow you to style elements when a particular event happens. So if you ever gone to a website where they had no CSS, you might see that the A, like an anchor tag or like a link, is usually colored one color, and if you hover over it, it doesn't change. It's just always blue, underlined, very old, right? What I can say is, so I have my element selector, but I'm adding on :hover. And what that's saying is, when the user hovers over my anchor tag, I want to color it orange. So it will start out as whatever color it is originally, maybe it's blue underlined, but as soon as I hover over that, it's going to turn orange. So there's pseudo selectors, there's a bunch of them. They're actually brand new in CSS3. You can select just a particular event, or you can select maybe if you have a list or like a navigation and you want to turn only the first navigation item blue for whatever reason. You could say navigation : first child. So again, all this is on W3 Schools. There's a big list of them. I'd advise you to go check out, but that's just the type of selector that they are. Does anyone else have any questions about selector types? So, CSS saves us a lot of work. When we store style sheets in external CSS files, we can reuse them. When the CSS files are linked to every HTML page on our website, that makes them usable, and we can change the look of the website just by changing one file. That's pretty powerful stuff. It's pretty awesome. So to summarize, CSS changes the way that HTML looks. It's simply a collection of rules. A rule contains a selector and a list of declarations. The declarations have a property and a value. That's the tree structure, as it were. And then we typically try to prefer external style sheets over inline or internal styling. And in our rules, we can refer to HTML using an ID, class, or a pseudo selector. So we kind of rushed through this, but this is just the complete overview of CSS. The next thing is, how do we use it? How do we make our websites look good? Because it's one thing to know about the programming language, or the language of CSS, it's another thing to know how to use it. So to do that, we're going to see a little bit of CSS in action. And I've decided, seeing as it's been about 20 minutes and we've stopped retaining information, I'm actually going to show you just a few techniques that I use to make my websites just look good. So what I won't do, typically when I start a new project, I won't start a new file, a new project, and start with just a HTML file. It's a waste of my time. What I will do is, not start with a rubber duck. I'll go to a site like Bootstrap and pick out a theme. So already a few of you maybe see some of these websites and think maybe if you're building a website, you might see something you like here. So I'm quickly going to go around the room and ask just one person to tell me what is their dream project. Well, if they could know anything about building HTML and CSS, say they knew everything, what would they build? Does anyone have that kind of idea?
I want to build, well, mine, I don't know if it applies, but I want to build a calendar for community where they put their workshops.
Where they put their workshop. So that would be something where users log on, right?
No.
Or just something that's displayed on the page.
Yeah, you don't have to. Like
Okay.
a Google Calendar, but it's open to public. They just go in, choose the date, and then they enter the information, link, whatever, time, how much, and then submit.
Okay.
That's it.
You could maybe find a theme for that. I'd say that'd be a little more specialized. What I'm saying is, does anybody have, maybe they want to build a blog?
Or blog, yeah.
Or a blog, yeah. Or maybe you have some kind of some web application